Okay.
Are we recording? Yes, we are. Okay. So I have to tell you, I don't even know where to begin here, except to say that today's guest is Leah Nixon Fitzgerald. And I have been so looking forward to talking to her. But also, when I was making my list of podcast guests that I just had to have on the show, you were on the top of the list because, again, even though we haven't met in person, I feel as though I know you from a distance, and you have inspired me so much and brought me to tears more than anybody on Instagram. So I am so inspired by your story, and I want people to get to know you a little bit better because I feel like your story needs to be heard because you are going to touch so many people. So thank you for being here. And without further ado, I would love for you to introduce yourself and start with your story and a little bit about your background.
Sure. Well, I'm honored to be on your podcast. I'm so excited about this. Yeah. So let's see. Grew up in South Dakota, which is maybe exactly how it sounds. Small community. Well, I mean, yeah. But Rapid City actually has a great like art scene, and we have like vibrant coffee shops and just like some of the most amazing people. I feel like we're family friends with, and I was always an artist since I was like 2 years old, and in high school I did pretty well in all of my classes, but no matter like what happened during the day, art class was there to like sort of decompress, and just like be able to just kind of be creative, and it's totally different. And so when it came to college and I realized that I could study art like for 4 years, I was like, oh my gosh, yes. That's so exciting. So I don't know. I think whatever, like, I wish somebody would have told me when I was in high school, like, that just go towards what really excites you, and you don't have to.
Yes.
Yeah.
I feel like, I don't want to bash my parents or anything, but I wish that they would have said that to me. I went to Baylor and I majored in political science, and I found it wildly fascinating. Don't get me wrong, but that wasn't the passion of my life or my heart. I went and I did it and I got it done, but it wasn't my thing. And I think until I reached my mid-20s, I was just grasping, wanting to get back to what it was that I was passionate about, which is music and writing and the arts as well. So I love that you did that from the jump.
Yeah. Well, sort of, Okay, so then I was in art school for 4 years, graduated, came back home. That was in at WashU in St. Louis. Came back home and tried to be an artist here. I also like worked as a dessert baker in a fancy shop, and that was kind of overwhelming. And like, what else did I do? I don't know. I feel like I did like 10 different
lots of odd jobs.
Yeah. I met a boy bowling because we have an adopted sister from Afghanistan. She's not legally adopted, but we took her in when she was in her senior year in high school. And then my mom and her best friend got a visa back to the United States, and got her kind of like sponsored her to go to engineering school. She has a computer science degree and she works for Microsoft now, which is amazing. But
your family, we could do a whole podcast on your family because from what I know of you and your sister, oh my gosh, I mean, Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. We can circle back to that. I don't want to keep interrupting.
So Hafiza's a badass. But yeah, so anyway, I was kind of like struggling because, you know, I was back home, like none of my high school friends were living here anymore, and I didn't really have any friends, you know. It was a really kind of rough transition coming back home from college. But so Hafiza was going bowling, and I was like, can I come? And she was like, sure. So this very cute guy actually picked us up, and just instantly I was like, hey, so what were you up to today? And I was like, and like I had known him for like 10 years. I don't know. And yeah, so and then we started dating a few months after that, and then he got a job in Kentucky. He's a metallurgical engineer.
Oh, holy cow. Okay. Smart dude.
Yeah. So, you know, I can hang with that. And so we built a tiny house actually in my parents' backyard, and we drove it down to Kentucky, which tiny houses seem like a very kind of romantic idea, like stress-free, but like seriously, they're so stressful to move.
I can imagine. It's like everything you own. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Well, and like Kelsey built the trailer, the aluminum trailer. So like, I don't know. And,
did you guys build the entire thing yourselves?
Yeah. On a huge budget. Like it was so bad. And there are so many things that I learned since, like that was my first kind of foray into building. Is that the right word? Foray?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So, yeah, like Kelsey taught me how to like put 2x4s together, and like I remember not even being able to like screw 2x4s together at the beginning, but then like, you know, your strength builds, and then I was like a boss putting things together.
Yeah, well, and you worked with Habitat for Humanity. Is that did you start working with Habitat for Humanity in Kentucky?
No.
Okay.
I actually my life would make the craziest Hallmark movie, but Grace and I actually raised $100,000 for Habitat for Humanity when we were in high school.
Holy moly.
Yeah,
again, we need to do a whole podcast episode on your family.
Yeah, like Grace and I have been sort of a team for a while. But anyway, so I moved down to Kentucky for, I think I was down there for like 3 years, but I was pretty miserable because we were really remote. Like in order to visit anybody, I'd have to drive like an hour. And then Kelsey was gone a lot because his job required a lot of travel. So like I'd be kind of like in our tiny house for like days on end without seeing anybody. And like, we had animals to take care of and stuff like that. But it was just really emotionally and spiritually tough on me to like not be around people. And I didn't really realize that until I went up to this magical place in Canada called Madonna House, where it's like a religious retreat sort of, and their mission is to kind of allow young people who are searching for like their life meaning to come and just stay with them and like work in the community.
What? I have never heard of this place. I know. Sounds like utopia.
It kind of is. It's amazing. Like, so anyway, I went up there. My mom had been there when she was in her early 20s, and it really helped her figure things out. And they like 80% of the food they eat, they actually grow themselves. And like, I just met a lot of people who were also not sure what they were doing with their lives, which was like super comforting, because I feel like we're often told like, you need to have yourself figured out, you know, like you're out of college, like what are you doing? You should like know, you know. And I think there was just so much uncertainty in my life because I was so like depressed in Kentucky. And I just like couldn't figure things out because of that. Like I didn't know if Kelsey was why I was so anxious, or I didn't know if Kentucky was why I was so anxious, or whatever. So when I went up to Madonna House, like I just like realized like I was so full of joy. and like, and I think it was just for, like being around people again. And so anyway, so that was part of my transformation. And so shortly after that, I decided to move back home to Rapid City, where my parents live, and I have a 15-year-old brother here. And so yeah, so I moved back. My mom and one of our good friends helped me move my tiny studio, which is an even smaller tiny house. It's about 150 square feet, maybe.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that is.
It's super tiny. It's super tiny. It's like basically like a small camper, I guess. But I had designed and built the whole thing myself, and
I've seen pictures of it, and it's gorgeous.
Yeah, thank you.
It's like ethereal. It looks like an artist's studio.
Yeah. So one of my best friends, we've been friends since first grade. She allowed me to move it into her backyard, and like,
cool.
And then shortly after that, I saw that Habitat for Humanity was hiring builders, and I applied, and I became part of the team, and it just felt so right, like I had this connection from like raising money in high school, and like we have a good family friend who, they had a Habitat home while they were growing up, and like and so it felt like all of the things that I love so much were like finally coming together, like Rapid City, like I think teaching people, especially women, how to build things was like super empowering. And I was using my hands. I was outside most of the time. And like all of the guys who I worked with were just like so fun, and like we joke around all the time, and they took me seriously as a builder, which was really like cool and refreshing.
Damn
I guess.
Straight.
Yeah. So, and like I didn't know how to do everything, but they didn't mind teaching me, and like I was willing to put in the work. One day, like there's one of my coworkers is an ex-Marine, and he needed like this he's maybe in his 60s, but he's like super fit and like amazing guy, and like just so much energy and focus on this certain thing. So he asked one of my other coworkers to rake this yard because it had a bunch of rocks in it, and this one guy was like so lazy about it and everything. And then it was the end of the day, probably like 4:00. I was kind of exhausted from everything, and he asked me to rake it, and I was just like, I just put my head down and started raking, and like I think that changed his whole view of me. He was like, oh my gosh, like, so
you're ready to work hard.
Yeah, exactly. And so like it was really sweet actually to see him softening towards everybody, because suddenly there was a woman on the team, and like I started to hear him saying like thank you, and like I appreciate you, and I was like, and other guys on the team were like, this is crazy, like Cliff does not say those things. And so anyway, so in August of 2018 we were building a house, putting up rafters, and so we were using a machine called a telehandler, and my boss and I actually like drove across town, got this telehandler, and I followed in the pickup that I think it was that day, and then it started raining, and raining pretty hard. We had a pretty wet summer that year, and so but we were under the impression that there were no weather days built into the grant, so like the question of whether to keep going was sort of like, yeah, we need to keep going, even though
like you almost didn't
crappy.
have a choice.
Right, exactly. And so we kept going. I was the one responsible for holding the guide rope, so we'd like scoop up a rafter on the telehandler. It's like a really big forklift with a really long telescoping arm on it, and so we'd scoop up the rafter, tie a guide rope to it, and then I'd walk beside it, and like try to prevent the rafter from like swinging and hitting anybody out of the house on the second floor, or there was a neighbor right next door who like super eccentric front yard, like whirligigs and bird feeders, a bright blue cement driveway, and like a bright blue house. And anyway, so I was really worried about like hitting any of his whirligigs off of his like carport. So anyway, that's pretty much the last thing I remember is just like slipping on this mud and struggling like a little mouse leading a brontosaurus. And yeah, suddenly, I don't know, skip a few days and I woke up in the hospital. What had happened is, and it's so funny because like I remember that day so well, but I don't remember anything of the accident.
You don't remember it like coming towards you or anything like that?
No, nothing.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's so interesting how your brain can like block stuff out like that, you know? Maybe it's back there somewhere, but yeah, so I don't know. I must have just like run the wrong way. And
so you woke up like 3 days later?
I don't even know how many. Yeah, probably like 3 or 4 days later. Like I had just been in and out of surgery for basically like 3 days straight. And
holy cow.
So yeah, I mean, it was like, it's hard for me to not believe that there was some sort of master plan involved in all of this, because literally the day before I had been meaning to sign up for supplemental health insurance for like months. And then literally the day before, I met with the lady at the Habitat office, signed the paper for supplemental health insurance.
Oh my God.
And then the accident happened the next day. And I had taken in my dog to see the vet and like do her yearly shots the day before as well. So like,
you were taking care of business that day for sure.
Exactly. Yeah. Which is so unlike me, you know. I'm like,
I can totally relate. I have days where I just conquer them.
Yeah. If somebody said like your next year is going to be like you're basically going to be dead for the next year, like what's your perfect day to get ready for this? Like that was my perfect day. Like I needed what I needed to do. So like because I signed that paper, it was definitely the worst gamble that insurance company ever took on, because the next day, like because of all of the like the ambulance, the broken bones, the surgeries, the like the x-rays and stuff, it's basically like Aflac, I guess, what I signed up for. I got $30,000, which basically covered a van for me now. So it's just like,
which is so crazy that everything is so expensive. So for everybody that's listening, Leah was working on a home for Habitat Humanity, building a home for another person, and essentially a crane fell on you and it crushed where did it fall on your body?
Okay, so I have seen photos of the accident since, which is so crazy because like everything is in perfect detail. You know, I don't remember it at all, and like I can talk to the coworkers who were there, but like truly, who remembers it best are these photos, I guess. Like,
yeah.
And so what happened is I was pushed backwards. I fell onto the cement, I think. It landed on my leg, like the arm of it, which it's a 22,000 pound machine. It landed on my leg. And somehow, because of the way that I landed, my spinal cord broke. It's called the burst fracture, T4 and T5. So basically, like below my chest, I have no feeling, and no movement. At least not purposeful movement or feeling that makes any sense. So, but the important thing is that I was wearing a hard helmet. Thank God. Like I could have not been wearing a hard helmet, and I don't think I'd be talking to you right now if I hadn't. The hard helmet, the eccentric neighbor who has the blue driveway, said that he actually saw it fly off my head, but it must have done its job before it flew like 20 feet. And just from the photos, the thing that really shook me was that my right hand was literally centimeters away from the telehandler arm. Like,
oh my gosh.
And the way that my spine broke, you know, if it had been a few inches higher, like I wouldn't have control of my hands anymore. And it's just like, oh my gosh. So I think like waking up in the hospital, I actually needed to be told several times that I wouldn't be walking again.
Yeah, can you walk us through, like, you wake up, it's probably in some sort of like groggy daze because you have no idea what's going on. Like, what happens next?
Yeah, well, I feel like things kind of are a little fuzzy slash maybe out of order for me about that time. But let's see. The thing that I remember first is feeling like um, God was with me in the bottom of everything, and like God was the particles holding the whole universe together. And like, it's such a simple thing, but it's like
So beautiful.
it's all that was there for me, I guess. But like I had this feeling that like I couldn't disappear, or I couldn't, yeah, not that I couldn't die, but just that I don't know. I can't even say it in words, I guess. It's just,
Yeah, I mean, I feel like those supernatural experiences are really hard to boil down into words that
mhm.
have specific meaning. And I think sometimes spiritual experiences are so vast and those realizations are so vast that when you try and whittle them down or like put them in a bottle, it's kind of impossible. So in those
Mhm.
moments though, you felt like the presence of God and you felt like you were being supported that whole time.
Yeah.
And that
Yeah.
was one of your first thoughts?
I guess so, if that's a thought. I don't know. It was more like
Yeah.
a knowledge or something, or like a
Oh, like an inner knowing.
or just like a vision or image
Mm.
or something. I don't know. It was yeah, a place maybe. So anyway, I one of the things that I remember is feeling like I I might die. Um there was like this kind of like inky blackness that was super like inviting. Um and I felt like if I entered it, I
Mm.
wouldn't be in pain anymore, and like everything would be okay. And I remember like that being in that space a couple of times, but every time that I felt that way, like a family member would come and hold my hand. And I especially there was one point where so there was one point that my baby brother came and held my hand, and I knew that I couldn't leave because he was there. And it's really kind of crazy how
It is so powerful. Oh my gosh. Well, and I think, listening to you tell this story, I kind of watched it unfold, obviously not first person, but Grace was so amazing about updating every day and
mm-hmm.
sharing what was going on. And so I feel a little bit like I like vicariously lived it through her. And to
Mm.
hear too that like the tempting black inkiness, you didn't go down that road because your family brought you back every time. Like, how
Hmm.
incredible. And it seemed like they were there around the clock.
Yeah, they were. And I think like part of the reason they were able to be there around the clock is because the community just like circled my family, and we had
Oh,
like
that's
my family
beautiful.
had literally a month worth of breakfast, lunch, and dinner brought to them. And like so, and Grace and my brother and my Afghan sister, and actually Kelsey, who we had kind of been broken up at that point, and like I don't know, but we were still friends. He had actually come and visited like maybe a month prior. Um, and
And Kelsey is your now husband, for
yeah.
everybody that's listening to.
So yeah, so he
I didn't
like
realize you guys were broken up when you had the accident. Oh gosh, he
yeah.
must have flipped out when he got word.
Yeah. I mean, partly I think because he felt I feel like he probably felt a little responsible in that he had taught me how to build and everything, and like
Mm.
now, I I could have died because of all of this, and like
Mm.
I wouldn't have been his first friend to die, which is kind of crazy too. But
Wow.
I yeah. Anyway, like without hesitation, he dropped what he was doing and flew to Rapid City and was part of that support system for my family, and like
Mm.
and yeah, I definitely remember like him being there, and he's just that type of person who like will drop everything um to help somebody who needs him. And it ironically maybe or something, I don't know, like I think from such a traumatic accident or like a traumatic event, my heart felt numb too. Like I couldn't sort out feelings of like, how I
Mm.
felt about Kelsey. Like
Yeah.
that was way too much. Like
Yeah. You were just
I
focused
was
on
like,
surviving, I'm sure.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And
And I
like I
feel
don't
like,
know, I go on.
well, I'm sorry I interrupted you, but I feel like, I've experienced some emotional trauma, not physical trauma like you've experienced, but from what I've read about trauma too, is once you reach a certain threshold, it's like your brain reacts and goes, no more, done. We are at capacity. And so, from
Mm.
what I understand, I think your reaction is very normal for the amount of trauma that you experienced. And I mean, going back to those first few days, that first, what, month, 2 months, you were fighting for your life. I mean, I remember following Grace's Instagram posts, and, one day it would be you getting out of surgery. Then a few days later, it would be, she's going back into surgery. We don't know what's going to happen. Please pray. And
Hmm.
so, can you walk us through some of that too? Like, how aware were you of what was happening, and how many surgeries did you end up having? Or can you even count?
I don't even remember. I think like
Mhm.
14 or something. But because of the trauma that happened to my leg, my foot was absolutely crushed to smithereens by the telehandler. And like there was interestingly, so have you heard of the Sturgis Rally by any chance? The
Yeah,
Sturgis motorcycle rally?
of
Okay, so
course.
Sturgis is like half an hour away from Rapid City. And
Hmm.
it happens every August. And because my accident happened at the time of the Sturgis Rally, there happened to be a lot of like visiting doctors here, because like trauma doctors, because every year, like I would say at least 5 to 10 people die in the Sturgis Rally. Um,
Holy
and
cow.
so,
I didn't realize
so
that.
like there were,
That
I
many
know
people.
it's wild. I mean, I would say that some of them happen because deer jump out, and like
Sure.
against the deer, you're just gone. And I think a lot of them are alcohol related accidents as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, so there were like these amazing surgeons who were at the hospital at that time, and So again, like another checkbox, like someone was looking out for me. But so this very like brilliant Italian doctor he told my family, I want to save even her toenails. Like he was so committed to saving my foot.
Again, you do need a Hallmark movie. Actually, not a Hallmark movie. You need like a regular movie.
Well, thank you. So yeah, he really tried. Like, I have this scar that runs down my entire left leg because they took a vein out and rerouted it through my trunk into my right leg, which I don't even understand how that works, but sure. They really wanted to save my leg, especially below the knee, because I think with amputees, the more leg you can save, the better chance they have of like being able to walk or something. Which it's like a far off future for me, I think, of like repairing my spinal cord with probably stem cells. And then I would have to like battle the whole thing of like walking with a prosthetic. But this is funny because like I said, it took me a little bit to process the fact that I wouldn't be walking again, because like they told me that they were going to do this amputation, and they kind of asked me my permission because like I was sort of awake at that point. And I was like, totally fine as long as I get one of those kangaroo legs. You know, those ones that like people can run with?
Yes.
Yeah. So I was like totally into it. And then the second time they needed to amputate
the best attitude. I don't like, it blows my mind. So, okay. So, but for those of you who are listening, so you wake up and you still have both legs when you initially wake up after the accident.
You know what? I didn't even know it because I couldn't feel them, and they were under the blankets. And my family wouldn't let me see them or like my leg at all. So yeah, I didn't really know what was going on. I felt like I thought I was in so much pain because, well, the telehandler had just fallen on me, but I didn't realize like exactly what the pain was. I think my mind was like trying to figure out my body at that point, and like it I have a pretty like good imagination anyway, so at a certain point like I felt like a rotisserie chicken just like chilling on ice. Like I think my lower body, like I was, you know, like the reality of my nerve pain was sort of like I was trying to figure out what that was, I guess. Like nobody was there to really tell me like, oh, like, yeah, you broke your spinal cord, you're going to have this incredible nerve pain for potentially the rest of your life. Like and I didn't even like, I hardly knew anything about paralysis before my accident, so like
well, I didn't realize because you don't come up against it very often.
So like I had no idea that and I don't know the percentage right now, but I know more women with paralysis than men suffer from nerve pain. But I think it's something like at least 50% of people with paralysis have nerve pain. And, you know, some people ask about like phantom limb for me. And I think what they don't realize is that like my entire lower body is basically a phantom limb. Like like every waking moment, like right now, it's funny because like some people were trying to teach me meditation to like kind of overcome the nerve pain and like get past it. But I think like a lot of meditation techniques are kind of pointless for nerve pain because it's like, you know, like typical meditation, it's like, oh, do a body scan, like start at your toes and like focus on your toes and like, and for me, it's hard for me to not focus on my toes and focus on my knees and focus on my hips and like because every single cell almost feels like it's like this vibrating energy that like I don't know, like I it's almost hard for me to concentrate on like what my fingertips feel like because it kind of feels like nothing, you know. Whereas like my nerve pain feels like everything. Does that make any sense?
I don't know. Well, and I can't imagine living with that every day. And you've been so open about that on Instagram too, which I want to circle back to because I feel like I have so much that I want to ask you about. One thing that really stood out to me was how vulnerable you and Grace both were with what you were sharing and what you were posting about your accident, and even just the pictures. You know, Instagram is such a visual platform, and everybody's like, what's the best representation of myself in this moment? Let's put that on Instagram. But you were putting like, or Grace was putting you in a hospital bed and you coming out of surgery. And I wonder, how were you conscious of that? And did you consciously do that? And what gave you the bravery to show up so fully in those moments?
I think I felt so strongly connected to my Instagram community because of like, they were the people who really got me through like living in Kentucky pretty much by myself. Like, I honestly like some of my like closest friends I've met through Instagram, which is so interesting. And like, I don't know, I felt like it was super important to bring people along for like this surprising twist in my story, because, and I think that I have actually like made people so much more aware of what it is to have a spinal cord injury, because like they felt connected to me before all of this happened, and like it was just
I'm
such
one
a
of
shock.
them. Yeah.
It was like such a shock to everybody, and I felt like it was important to say like this could happen to anybody, and like I think we don't think about that very often.
Absolutely. Well, and I think I remember in those moments, and I remember watching the stories. I was watching them every day. It was like, you know how when you watch somebody's story all the time, they're the first one that pops up
Yeah.
in your feed. So your sister was always the first person to pop up in my feed during that time. And I remember telling the people around me your story because I was so touched by it, because it reminded me of how precious life is. And I think too, I had just watched you guys via Grace in Switzerland having this like gorgeous, idyllic family vacation. And then you come back, and what, a week later, 2 weeks later, not even a month, all of a sudden, everybody's in the hospital, banded around you, and you've endured this horrible traumatic accident where you do end up losing almost all of your leg, right?
Yeah, it's above the knee amputation. Sorry, Will, what's going on? What happened with all the brows? It just got absorbed. Sorry. Yeah, that was another really crazy part of the story too, is like, yeah, we had just like had this amazing once in a lifetime vacation, and like, we had even said, like, I think my dad said something about like, you never know if this is going to be the last time we were all together for a while. And
I just got full body chills.
It's just like so ridiculous, like, yeah, I don't know. Certainly, it was a family reunion a lot sooner than we had all hoped after Switzerland. But yeah, and like one of my highlights of that trip was kind of going off trail and climbing this waterfall with my siblings, and like being kind of the ringleader of all of that. And like, it's definitely, something I did because I had been friends with Kelsey, and like he's just like that. Like, he's so excited about like we get to explore this world, and
well, and in your Instagram feed pre-accident, you were like running and outdoors. Pretty much all of the photos that I remember seeing, you were outdoors doing something.
Yeah.
Is that incorrect, or is that pretty?
Oh no, that's correct. Yeah, I mean, I feel like I lived outside basically when we were in Kentucky. And I absolutely loved running. Like, Rapid City has some amazing. I hope people don't move here because of this advertisement, because I love how small it is the way it is. But like right in town, we have some amazing hiking and running trails, and it's just like this kind of wildlife preserve right in the middle of our city. So
That's so
like,
cool. Well, and I love
yeah.
watching you go out still. So, okay. So another question that I have is you and Grace, how long were you in the hospital after your accident?
I was in the ICU for 29 days.
And they sent you to Denver?
Yeah. So then I got life flighted to Denver,
Okay.
to Craig Hospital for 3 months. Like
After
a
the
month.
29 days.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So you were hospitalized for like 4 months total.
Well, I was technically inpatient for 7 months, I think, because after Craig, then I went to a place called QLI, which is in Omaha, and it's like kind of I don't know, a more advanced rehab place. So like I would say Craig Hospital is sort of a critical rehab place. Like they were still, so actually one of the biggest surprises of all of this was that like a month into being at Craig, we were supposed to have my kind of discharge meeting saying like when they thought I'd be discharging from the hospital. And then instead they were like, you have to have another back surgery. I was just like what?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. It's like
But they
Mind
showed,
Ninja. You think, oh, freedom, and then starting over again.
yeah, exactly. Okay, well, let's start over at square one again, and so yeah, they showed me my like x-rays and stuff, and the screws that were put in originally were like way too long, and so they were like dangerously close to my aorta and my esophagus, and I was like, wait, what? My mom was like, did they grab the wrong screws out of the drawer or what? Like,
what
I don't
the
know.
F? Oh my gosh. Okay.
But,
So,
so it was really, that was another blessing actually, because of the, like my back was actually growing these bone spurs, and they were causing this pocket of fluid that was putting more pressure on my spinal cord. So actually my paralysis was creeping up, and my right hand was actually becoming paralyzed. And so if they hadn't done that second back surgery, who knows where my paralysis would be. But
as an artist, I can't imagine. So that leads me into my next question, which was you waking up from one of your surgeries and asking Grace. I don't want to give away what you asked Grace, but what did you say?
Can I still draw? I think that might have been my first question ever after I woke up.
Oh gosh.
And
that's
like at that point I was,
art is for you. Yeah. It's like your soul.
I mean, and I don't remember asking that question. It was just like something so deep inside of me.
Yeah.
And I actually in college, like I sort of had this like daymare, I guess you could call it, of like, what if I lost the ability to draw all of a sudden? Like, and it was such a huge question in my brain, like, like if I came to art class, like, one of my drawing classes in college, and like suddenly I just like, it wouldn't come out right. Like, what would that mean for my whole life? I don't know. Anyway, so maybe that's the reason that was my first question. But it was like,
it's almost like
I wasn't even
preparing you.
Yeah, for sure. Oh, it gets weirder because when I was in my early 20s, I sort of had a premonition that something was going to happen to me in like my early 30s or 40s. Like I thought it was going to be like cancer. But yeah, when I woke up in the hospital, I was like, oh, okay, well, got that out of the way. Like,
holy cow.
I understand now.
You've had like a spiritual connection to God your whole life then, or for a really long time.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, I grew up Catholic, and I think it's like, actually on a podcast the other day, I heard like this guy say like, we're all called to be mystics. Mm-hmm. I just thought that was so amazing,
I think we are, because I think that's who we are, and And it's my understanding that we are a part of God. And I think, have you ever read Conversations with God by Neil Donald Walsh?
No.
It's so good. But
I'm going to write that down.
He talks about it kind of in terms of like, if God is the ocean, then we're each a cup of the ocean. So I think we are all called to be mystics because we want to know who we are at our deepest depths. And I think who we really are is part of this eternal, all-knowing being. And so I think it's interesting how, especially Western culture, but we're taught not to trust our gut instincts, I think, a lot. And we're taught not to listen to those inklings and to that inner voice. Yet our lives would be so much easier if we listened to what we were being led into or whispered.
It's so hard, though.
It is.
I especially when that something is scary, I guess.
Yeah. It is. But then again, at the same time, just listening to your story, like even in your non-waking moments, when you said in the beginning, you felt like you were being held. Now, I can't relate to your story on every level, but when I go into those deep, dark places myself, I have that same sense, like you're here for a reason and I'm with you. And I don't necessarily know what the future is going to hold, but I feel like I'm led to the next step.
Yeah. I think that's something that Madonna House preaches too. It's like, you don't need to know you just need to trust that you can take the next step. And like, you just need to like keep doing like life, I guess. I don't know. And
but
exactly.
you didn't just like show up. You literally danced. And I remember watching you on the news because you guys got some press for this, but you and Grace had a dance party every single day in your hospital room. Like, what gave you the courage and the balls and the gumption to dance while you don't even know if you're going to like wake up from your next surgery? Like, what goes through, what is emanating from your spirit that allows you to have that kind of gumption and joy?
That's a good question.
Or just walk me through this moment.
I think what inspired me to dance was that, like, you know, having gone through kind of 3 years of intense like solitude, one of the things that I would turn to, like when I was really low, was I would turn on a song and start dancing by myself, and I called it like Dance Party of One, you know. And it was just like it just like kind of would make me feel better. And so the doctors were asking me to, every hour they wanted me to like lift up my arms like this and like spread my fingers like this. And oh my gosh, it was just so hard. Like, it's so crazy to be in
because it was painful. It was hard,
painful, and just like I was so weak. I think I went, well, okay, I think I had 3 full like blood transfusions total. Like while I was trapped under the telehandler, I was like, my whole bloodstream was replaced, which is just insane. And so I was like so weak. I didn't eat for I think 9 days. And like the nurses were so impressed with like how well I had done without eating for 9 days, because they were like, this is really weird. And they actually tried to put a feeding tube in, but it got kinked, and so like it barely did anything for me. And so anyway, so like I was just really like depleted, I guess. And like I think because of all the trauma that your spinal cord kind of goes into spinal shock, they call it. And so like just everything is so messed up. Your blood pressure is up and down and up and down, and like, so
Your
they really,
body is just totally resetting itself.
yeah. Yeah. So anyway, the doctors asked me to do the exercises, and I was like, you know what? This would be a lot easier if we turned on some music. And so then we just started to do these dance parties, and like got the nurses involved in them sometimes. And
I mean,
I think
watching them weep. Really. It was so inspiring to see. I think it's the juxtaposition of like, here you are in all this pain, yet you're literally dancing through it.
Yeah.
That's so powerful.
Interestingly, I don't know if it was the drugs or what, but I was super funny in the ICU. Like, and it was interesting too. Like I feel like I became very childlike because, suddenly people were doing everything for me, like including like wiping my butt, and feeding me. And so I was super childlike. And like the first time we really figured out, so the communication at first, like I was finger spelling into Grace's hands, and she was pretty good at interpreting what I was trying to say. And then we figured out that like I could use a Sharpie marker on construction paper, and like then I went to town. Like one night my mom and dad were there, and I like, they would, say something to me, and I'd furiously write out an answer, and then eventually they were like, Leah, we have to go. You have to go to sleep. And I was like, no, like I want to keep writing, because like it was just so like, like word vomit coming out, because I was so excited to communicate again. And I think I kind of realized that it, like, I don't know, the ICU was just like a really incredible experience, honestly. Up until that point, I would say that like one of my top 10 life experiences was getting my teeth pulled, my wisdom teeth out. Because like just the whole experience of like getting put under and like waking up afterwards, and I don't know, it's just like such a cool thing to get to experience as a human. But ICU takes a cake. And I would have a lot of like really deep philosophical conversations with my dad and my sister, like in the middle of the night. And I was just so aware of like the fact that my body was rebuilding itself. And so like I just felt like all of the good music that I would listen to were like helping rebuild my cells, and like the food that I would eat. And so like one of the things that I really hated was the hospital was trying to get me to drink these like protein shakes that were fat-free milk and corn syrup.
No.
Those were like the two basic ingredients in them. And I'm just like, this is stupid. Like,
that's going to put so much more strain on your body.
Who in the world thought this was a good idea to feed people? Like, why don't you just give like whole milk, like what's wrong with whole milk?
Real food. Yeah. Oh, I'm you're so self-aware. I have another question, and I guess I'm putting myself in your shoes in this situation. Like you're in the ICU and you're recovering. What is your moment of acceptance? Or did you have a moment in which you were like, okay, this is my new reality? Because I think for me, I would be going, what just happened? How did this happen? Maybe on a dark day, why did this happen to me? And so from your story and what I witnessed of watching it all unfold is that you just handled it with such grace. But was there a moment where you were like, holy shit, how do I accept that?
Like I think that question sort of still hits me at like really random times. And I think like one of the things that was hardest to grasp was like it's sort of like the moment when you first wake up. It's like, oh, Yep, I'm doing this again. I have to get into that wheelchair. I'm like, it's just like every morning, it's sort of something that you accept again. And, but I think because I sort of had a premonition early on, um, I was really able to accept it a lot more easily. I think I've also, I also have other spinal cord injury friends who say like, oh, like you've just been able to accept it so much faster than like I have, or most people seem to be able to. And I think it might be partly because my paralysis is pretty total. And so like I'm not really hoping to regain much without medical intervention. Whereas like if you have a partial spinal cord injury, I think the hope is like you're just like wanting to get everything back that you can. And for me it's sort of like, nope, like my legs are off the table. Like what can I do from here? And I think that was like a big thing at Craig. Like the mantra that I sort of have, it's like you can't go back, so let's go forward. Like, and I think just like not allowing yourself to really like wish for something that is not there, or like, it's not possible to change history. Like it's not possible to go back and say like, oh no, we do have a weather day built into this grant, so it's just like,
I had a really interesting thought the other day, and this may sound so basic, but I was just talking to myself and I was like, you can stop carrying all the baggage that you're carrying. You don't have to choose to bring this into every day of your life. And I know that we know that logically, but I think it's a different thing to act it out every day and choose, like you mentioned just a couple of minutes ago, acceptance every day. Like this is my new reality. And now I have the opportunity to do what I want with this day. And I don't have to keep going back in time, because my tendency is to want to fix everything that I can't fix. And I think coming to that realization that seems so obvious, but then trying to be aware of it every single day has changed my thought paradigm.
Yeah, I think something that comes to mind is like control. And I think I am maybe a little bit of a control freak. But this is
like it at all.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I maybe I'm particular about certain things, but like, I think just like knowing that you can control certain things, and then knowing that other things like you can't control. Like, I don't know. Like trying to do what you can about the things that you can control. Does that make
It makes total sense.
Or,
I think sometimes like the most simple sayings and mantras are stuff that we almost tune out because they seem so simple and obvious, but actually putting them into daily practice is really difficult. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think mantras are really interesting. I don't think I like consciously like repeat mantras to myself, but I think everybody kind of has these mantras, even if they aren't super conscious of what they are. Yeah. But like, I'll have certain things pop into my head, and it's just like, like that's a beautiful thought. I'm going to keep thinking about that. It's like, yeah, like exactly, like, can't change the past, so we might as well move forward. Or
well, that's one of the questions that I wanted to ask you is like, what were some of your life mantras? So I think that that's really powerful. I might use that one as the quote on our social media promo.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. It sounds good. Another thing that popped into my head, like I studied poetry in college. I was a poetry writing minor. And cool. And Grace and I feel like have really like allowed ourselves to use poetry in the last couple of years to kind of like paint, like, I don't know, sketch a little picture of what's going on spiritually with in ourselves.
Yeah. And I loved reading the poetry that you guys shared, but specifically Mary Oliver and What Will You Do with Your One Wild and Precious Life? And I have the bracelet. I bought it.
Yay.
But that was so powerful too, is not only were you inspiring yourself in those moments with dancing and poetry, you were sharing all of that with everyone.
Oh, sorry. I get weird spasms sometimes.
Okay.
Yeah. I think that's a really beautiful thing about like reading poetry is that it can come back to you at certain times when you need it. And I think that goes for like, having read the Bible or, just like Grace is actually really good at collecting these quotes that just are gorgeous. Incidentally, that's exactly something Anne Frank did. She collected quotes and wrote them down in a book and just so cool. Anyway, but yeah, like having these things that kind of can come to you and, feed you spiritually, I guess, at the times when you need it. I think it's so cool how we can, Mary Oliver passed away maybe a year ago.
Yeah.
Yeah. But she's still with me, and I think that was another thing actually that I was thinking a lot about. I don't know if it was in conjunction. I think it was with Mary Oliver's passing. She's still alive because of the work, the creative work she put out, and you still say Mary Oliver is incredible. You don't say she was incredible. She is incredible. Her poetry is incredible, and so I don't know.
And that's the power of the human spirit, to make something out of nothing and then share it. And I think for me, that's kind of my life's purpose when I think about it is if I could describe myself in one word, it would be creator, whether that's music or writing or creating a podcast. I think that's my mission in life. But I think that's so many of our mission in life, to take the essence of who we are and share it and share our humanity, because it's hard being human. But the more we share the real parts of ourselves, not the, Instagram filtered parts, but the real parts, the more it fosters connection and this feeling of hey, we're all just in this together doing the best that we can.
Totally.
Okay, yes. I have a couple more questions for you. Also, want to be sensitive. How are you feeling right now? Are you if you're uncomfortable or anything, you're good? Okay.
I'm fine. Yeah, I mean, I don't know how much or how long you wanted this whole thing to be, because
I was thinking an hour.
I feel like I could talk to you five hours, but yes.
No, but I mean, we're doing great. I just I want to be sensitive to what you're going on. But okay.
No, I don't. I mean, it's Corona time, so we don't have anything going on.
So true. Okay. I want to know a little bit about your love story. So, Kelsey, I'm going to paint the cinematic picture.
Okay.
You guys,
go ahead.
You break up and then you come back to South Dakota. You're working for Habitat for Humanity. You have this awful accident. He gets word of your accident, rushes to your bedside, and is there for you while you're recovering from all of these surgeries. Then what happens next?
Yeah. So, like I said, I think my heart was kind of numb and I couldn't make any decisions at that time, which, okay. So I totally admit, I mean, we had been together for 8 years, I think. 7 or 8 years.
You had been together a long time. Okay. I didn't realize it was that long.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I think because I had anxiety that I didn't really realize I even had, or I hadn't dealt with before all of this happened, I think it made it really hard to make any sort of commitment. I was just a kind of a commitment phobe.
I can see that for sure.
And I think, I don't know. And I think in the world of the internet, it feels like anything is possible, I guess. And you can order anything from Amazon and have it here in 2 days. Yeah. So it's I could probably just go on a website and order my perfect man, or it should be like that. But it honestly is pretty hard to find somebody who is super compatible. And like it was really, I mean, it's so funny because I've heard other friends of mine say this, like, but it was really helpful to break up with him because I was able to, like, I had never lived on my own. Like I went basically right from living with my family to living with Kelsey, and like so I think, living on my own, living with friends, it was very like self-empowering, and like I did a lot of growing up in that year. But then I think one of the things that I realized when I woke up in the ICU and I started processing all of this was like, Kelsey is literally the perfect person for me as a para. Like, it's so weird. Like okay, this is another totally God thing. I thought after we had broken up, like one of the main thoughts was like, if Kelsey and I are going to get back together, it's going to be me that changes, not him. And I didn't.
Okay, full body chill moment again, because that takes guts to admit something like that to yourself. It's way easier to blame problems on somebody else versus saying, I have to do the work.
Yeah. And like, I didn't even know what that meant exactly. And it sort of felt like, okay, well, I'm perfect. I don't know what has to change. So like, it's not going to work out, But then when I ended up in the wheelchair, I was just like, God had this plan all along. And like, now I am the person who Kelsey can serve best. I don't know. I don't even know how to say it, but like, Kelsey is a very strong, like physically strong person. He loves adventure. Like one of the things he was saying to me in the ICU was like, when he saw me balancing on my bedside, it was incredibly hard. Like I felt like an egg that was trying to balance on its tippy point. And when he saw that, he got so excited because he was like, I think you'll be able to ride a horse. And like, I was like,
gosh, but hope, right away, hope.
I was not even able to pee by myself. And here he is like thinking that we're going to be riding horses in the mountains together. And it's
that is the perfect partner though, because you want somebody that's going to be taking you places and doing cool things, not like, okay, we're going to have to settle for a life that neither of us, had planned on or are wanting. Like you're still doing stuff.
Yeah. And now he's like, done plumbing and electricity in the kitchen, and like, oh, that's a whole nother conversation. But yeah, like I realized that like he wasn't going to limit me. And in fact, like he wouldn't let me limit myself either in this new life.
That is so profound.
So yeah, I mean, obviously we still have our things. Like I think every couple does, and like every relationship is going to look different. And I think you just have to say like, I don't know. I think I think like the accident sort of kicked my butt in gear, and it was like, your life is not limitless, or like you're not going to live forever. Like, what do you want? And I think that was like the freedom that came out of the accident. I was like beyond, like, I don't know. One of the questions that you had said is like, what would you want to tell your former or like your younger self? Like what I've thought about this before, and I think like I'd want to say freedom can come in unexpected forms, like it's not always going to look like what you think it will look like. Which incidentally, I think Jesus talked a lot about too,
Oh, totally.
Like in order to find your life, you have to lose it. And like,
there's something about being willing to give up what you feel like is the most important thing in the world. That balancing act of being willing to give it up I don't know what exactly happens in our brain, but it's like the whole brain chemistry changes. And all of a sudden, you're able to look at life through a new lens with a sense of gratitude with whatever your reality is. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, I think so.
Because I've thought about that a
Like
lot.
once you kind of give up expectations or control, you're ready to have a really wild, fun ride, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, and I think too, as somebody who totally relates to you on the anxiety front, that has helped me with anxiety too, because a lot of my anxiety comes from being a perfectionist and wanting to have everything just right. And when I think about that, like that conscious act of letting go, even if it's like, I'm going to let go what my living room looks like today. That shifts, I mean, as little and tiny as that is, it shifts everything. Because I can so easily, and I'm sure you can relate, go into like an anxiety spiral over spilled milk. I mean, not literally, but you know what I mean? Like something small. And so that active, just letting go and practicing acceptance. And I think, I grew up in a super conservative Christian household, and I've studied world religions. And one of the things that I love about Buddhism is the practice of non-attachment. And I think that's the part of like tiny living and minimalism, like we talked about before we started recording, that I'm so attracted to as well, that also decreases my anxiety. It's like, what's important in life? Is it what we have? Is it even what we do? Or is it just who we are? Like, what do I want to be obsessed with in my life? And I want to be obsessed with growth. I think that's like, even though I would define myself as a creator and somebody who makes music and somebody who writes, and somebody who's, podcasting now and making videos, the thing I've been most obsessed with so far in my 33 years is self-development. Like, I have been obsessed with it, and I'm nowhere near where I want to be yet. But I love knowing that I care about myself enough to do the work to try and get there if I ever get there.
That's cool.
You know what I mean?
You know who's obsessed with self-help books? My sister. Since she was like a teenager, she's been reading like self-help books, and like she's probably one of the best people I know. And I think it's so cool that she like still craves like, being inspired in that way. And like, I don't know.
I wish I would have known her more personally when we both did Teach for America in New Orleans, because we didn't teach at the same school. Our paths crossed, but it was so brief. And so I knew of her. That's how we connected on Instagram. But I feel like had we had a real conversation, we would have connected on so many levels. But I mean, things happen the way that they're supposed to. I'm still connected. And here I am talking to her sister, which again, like this whole conversation is just such a gift. But I do have a couple more questions for you. Is that okay?
Okay. All right. Sounds good.
Okay. So let's see. I think you answered this, but has there been a person or a being in your life that has helped you expand or been an example of how to overcome whatever difficulty you are facing? And the reason I ask this is because I'm doing a course right now on self-worth. And it talks about how in order to truly have the life that we really want, whatever it is, our self-worth has to match that. And in order for our self-worth to match whatever life it is that we're trying to call in, sometimes we need to have expanders or examples of people in our life who have done kind of what we want to be doing. And you went through such an intense experience. How do you get from one side to the other. And I don't mean that in a like black and white way, because you don't have to be totally on the other side. But was there a pillar, a person or a thing that you held on to that was like, I can continue, I can keep it going?
My sister.
Mm.
Yeah, I don't know. I remember saying to her in the ICU that I think God made your eyes blue because he knew how much I miss this guy. And I think that she just like every time she came into the ICU room, it was just like so joyful and like, oh, I don't know. I don't know who I'd be without her, really. You know, she was 2.5 years older than me, and I think like we were always pretty close. My mom, she said it had like a free range parenting style, so I remember like just hours of adventure every day, especially in the summers with Grace, and like we'd run around and like we called it the back 40. It was like this grassy area behind our house, and we'd seriously like write musicals in our basement and like design catalogs of silly stuff, or like we made wine one time and tried to sell it to our neighbors. Like I don't know, we were just like little ragamuffins. And so like I think,
but best friends kind of from the beginning.
Yeah, I mean she was a little bossy.
Older sisters usually are. I'm the oldest sister too, so
yeah. We sort of had our attention, but like I think we're absolutely like amazing compliments to each other, and like and it was sort like, so we had formed our company Tiny and Snail.
Yeah, that was going to be my next
about
question.
a year
I want people to know about this.
Yeah, so when I was still in Kentucky, find a creative job. Grace was meanwhile, she had started an Etsy store. She was selling handmade cards, and like I don't know, Grace and I just have like kind of weak wrists. I don't know if it's like a genetic thing or what, but like she was literally giving herself like carpal tunnel from making these cards and selling them on Etsy. And she was only selling them for like $9 a card, you know, which it's not enough to like make up for. And so anyway, I was like, Grace, you are never going to make any money doing this. And I was like, and I need somebody to be a boss for me. I think we should work together. And so yeah, so then we decided to start a stationery company, and so we literally launched the day that I started working for Habitat. We launched our website. So like I would work an exhausting like 8-hour day at Habitat. I'd come home, I'd work on this tiny house that I was living in, and then I'd also like work on card designs and our website stuff. And like I was just, Lucy, you want to see my dog?
Yeah,
Lucy,
of course.
Come here. Okay.
Oh, she's so sweet.
Yeah. Here,
that part of the story too of your accident of like not being able to see your dog right after.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. Oh.
Don't they just make everything better?
Oh, they do. Yeah. Yeah.
I have 3, and one of them reminds me so much of Lucy. She looks like the blonde version of Lucy, like same body type.
Oh yeah.
Such a similar face.
Yeah. Lucy's so sweet.
I feel like my dogs keep me sane.
Yeah. She's my sunshine. So anyway, I forget. Oh, Tiny and Snail. Yeah. So so this is a really interesting twist in my life story. Okay. So I got back from Switzerland and I was on the job site, like working on, or it was either before or after Switzerland, actually. It's like backbreaking labor out in 90-degree sunshine. And like, it's just like, I was like, oh my gosh, I don't know how much longer I can do this. I'm like, when will I be able to transition to Tiny and Snail, like part-time or full-time? And then a telehandler fell on me. And suddenly I have a disability check every week.
Yeah.
And I can still use my hands and my brain. And it's just like,
and so you can work on this
like
business
a weird,
full
a really
time.
messed up system, but sure, like a
roundabout way of getting there for sure.
Right. Yeah. I wish that the government would like sponsor artists right now. You know, it's just like,
Yes.
I feel like a lot of artists have the same problem as me. Like they're kind of stuck in this job that they probably aren't getting any fulfillment from, but they have to do it because, you know, we all have bills and we have to feed ourselves and house ourselves. But like the amount of freedom that I have gotten from that disability check is ridiculous. And I remember texting Grace, like I was like, when I found out that I basically be getting this for the rest of my life, I was like, I basically won the lottery, but I'm in a wheelchair and I have nerve pain, so I'm not sure. She was like,
again, like
wow,
your positive attitude is so amazing.
So anyway, yeah, I mean, it is sort of like somebody was like, you know what? I'm going to be your patron and I'm handing you a big box of inspiration, you know, like take it, do what you want with it.
Because that's kind of what your company is based on, is like bringing joy and inspiring people through these. And I don't even know how to describe them, but the cards are so personal and the illustrations are done by you, right?
Well, actually, that's an interesting thing because, like, I was always, you know, the artist in our family. But, like, growing up, I remember sitting at the kitchen counter, like, drawing right next to Grace. And at some point, like, my artistic level just, like, exceeded, you know, like, my older sister, which was kind of interesting. But when we formed this company, like, she had been selling her cards on Etsy at that point, and she was really like, she didn't want to give up like her company name, which was Your Biggest Fan, Grace. And I was like, Grace, okay, like if we're going to start a company together, we can't be Your Biggest Fan, Grace. Like it has to include
it has to include you. Yeah.
And I think it took a really long time for her to get to the spot of like letting go. And also like I think I had to let go of like, I'm the artist, you know? And so once we actually started collaborating together, our styles just like worked really well together. And like, you know,
it's pretty
seamless. Yeah, like sometimes I would draw something and she would color it, or sometimes she would have an idea and like I would execute it, or, you know, like often I'll design something on the computer and then I'll text it to her and she's either like, I think this could be better, or like, I love it. And like, she's really good at saying like, I love it. That's perfect. And it's like,
I mean, she is a cheerleader for other people. Like she's their biggest fan. Yeah. I feel like that's very much her from what I know of her.
Yeah, it like totally feeds my ego and it's great.
But we all need that a little bit, especially when you're sharing something vulnerable that you created. So, okay, so now you have this card company and you are making these amazing collections of cards. So can you tell everybody where they can purchase them?
Yeah, our website, tinyandsnail.com.
And I'll link everything too.
Perfect. And the way we got the name Tiny and Snail is like, we were searching for a name and I came across this name on like one of our family friends. His daughter drew this little cartoon and he put it on Instagram and it said The Amazing Adventures of Tiny and Snail. And I was like, Tiny and Snail. I was like, I am obsessed with tiny houses. Grace is obsessed with snail mail. Like, this is kind of the perfect name for us.
It is.
And at first, like, she was like, that's kind of weird. But, like, she was asking one of her friends from college about it. And her friend was like, wait, go back to that. Like, tiny and what? And so.
It's memorable. It sticks out.
Thank you. Yeah, and I kind of like it because in my own, like, humorous way, it reminds me of a law firm. like tiny and still.
Yeah, like a cartoon law firm.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So
Love it.
I don't know. I just have like these little imagination rants or whatever. I don't know. I don't even
Yeah, like an artist. I mean,
Yeah.
I can totally relate, but I think, yeah, you're just so cool. Okay, so I want to ask you a couple more questions and then we can wrap up.
Okay.
I know this is hard to answer, but I ask, and it's almost kind of like a selfish question because this is something that I'm working on in my life really hard, and that's like healing my self-worth. So, how do you cultivate such a high sense of self-worth?
Yeah, that was one of the questions that kind of stood out. And I was actually kind of talking about it with Grace before too. But I think one of the biggest things is that I never put too much self-worth into exterior things.
Mm-hmm.
Grace and I were Grace was saying that like our mom didn't allow us to like have like 17 magazine when we were teenagers. Like I grew up on PBS and American Girl magazine or whatever. And it was just like very like wholesome sort of. And I think if I lost my hands, it would have been a bit of a different story, you know, because like I think so much of my self-worth is in my hands, because and in my brain too, like bye, I love you, Will. And I also think a lot of my self-worth is found in my relationships with my family and friends. And so like being in the ICU. So this is another crazy thing. When I was in high school, I was super stressed out. And I don't know if many people do this, but like one of my fantasies was sort of like driving off a cliff and not dying, but just being in the hospital and being appreciated for just being alive.
Wow. Because I've had the like getting into a fatal car accident fantasy and like those deep, dark mental health moments, but I don't survive it. So yours is definitely different from mine, but holy cow.
Yeah.
Isn't that how we should all be revered and appreciated? Like life is just hard. Let's just appreciate the fact that we're breathing.
Right? Yeah, I know. And sometimes breathing is even hard to do. But yeah, so I think like, in a very twisted way, like, you know, I got to experience my fantasy and then, you know, I got to live that for about a month and then more was demanded of me, you know, like learning a whole different way of living. And I don't know, but I think like I have been released from a lot of expectations and like it's kind of refreshing, I guess. And I think that's one of the things that I appreciate the most about this accident is like I'm still here. And I don't know, here's an example. So I feel like there's been several instances where I find something unjust. Like there's a medical facility in my town that I checked out, a rehab place after I got back to Rapid City, and I heard 3 times that day, "We can't help people like you." And I was like, so like, you know, I was on the sports side, like wondering if they had any like arm exercise machines, and they were like, "Well, we're not really built for people like you." And I was like, "Huh." And they were like, go check out the other rehab place. And then the other rehab place was like, you could only be working out in there if you're with a physical therapist for the hour or whatever. And like I couldn't just go use their arm bike. And so they were like, yeah, we're not really built for people like you. And I was just like, what is it? And
Ooh,
like, I was just so mad, like
well,
state of the
it's
art
so
facility,
insensitive
brand new. And
too.
like, I was like so disappointed that, you know, like if they can't help me, like who the hell are they
Yeah.
built for, And like, unfortunately, I think they're built for rich kids who are in sports in high school. Um, anyway, like,
Oh,
and after almost dying, my mom was like, well, be careful who you talk to about this in town because, it's a small community. And I'm like, I don't care. Like, I almost died. I did not almost die so that I could be politically correct. Like,
yeah.
and so I feel like I've just been released from a lot of like expectations, or like, like, oh, you can't do that, like
It's like
you
the
can't.
cultural norms have been lifted from your eyes. And all that stuff is BS anyway.
Yeah.
That's just kind of what I derived from just listening to you. So stop me if I'm putting words in your mouth. But I think there's something beautiful about, we grow up and there are all these family norms, societal norms, cultural norms. And we grow up thinking like that's reality. But I would imagine when you face death, you go, wow, that was a load of crock. And so I'm going to just rebuild the way that I want to see the world.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
so,
And it's interesting because I feel like I'm coming up against a lot of these like huge power systems, and it's just like very disheartening because like
yeah.
it's sort of like, what can one person do against everything? Yeah, that's a whole different podcast probably. But
There's a quote from Mother Teresa, and she said, I can do no great things, only small things with great love.
yeah.
And that's something that when I feel overwhelmed by injustice or things that I feel like, well, what can I do? That's the quote that I always like go back to. Well, and I want to be even more aware of this and take action on it more. But to figure out like, how can I love that person or that situation or that animal in whatever capacity I can now? And even if it's not going to transform it, maybe it would help a little bit.
Yeah.
Because it's overwhelming. I mean, there are so many injustices. Like so many people are suffering right now. They don't have food and they don't know if they're going to be able to pay their rent and if their businesses are going to survive. It's wild and it can be so overwhelming to think about on a whole. But I love that quote by Mother Teresa because I feel like it boils it down so beautifully.
Yeah. Yeah. And maybe that is what it comes back to, is just like, you can share your life on Instagram, and like you can, have your younger brother live with you for a year, and like you can like have, little like Habitat volunteers have come back and worked on my house, and it's just like so touching that
wow, full circle.
They can get back to me in that way. Yeah. And so anyway, I really can't remember what we were talking about before.
You're talking about self-worth, but I think it's so beautiful that your self-worth doesn't come from the external sources. It comes from the stuff in your life that really matters. Like your brain,
and
your hands,
I think,
your family.
Yeah. And I think Kelsey, like one of the things he's said since the beginning is like, he's like, oh, I can't, like when I see a woman dressed up like for an outing or something with high heels on and a tight skirt, I'm like, just go put on sweatpants. Like, what are you doing? Like,
hey, you look, check it out.
Yeah, there you go. And he's like, if you look comfortable, you would look way sexier, And it's just like, oh, okay. Like totally shifting my idea of what like men might find attractive, but and also like this is really sweet. In the ICU, I think this was before we got engaged. We literally got engaged in the ICU. I asked him to marry me. But it's not like he hadn't asked before that. So it was sort of like, it was my turn.
Yeah, because he was ready before, but you weren't.
Yeah. So anyway, I said, how can you still love me? You know, like I was like a slug, you know, I and he said, I think I love what's in here and in here. And I was just like, like, that's the best answer. Like, I think every single woman wants to be valued
Every
for
single
those two
woman.
things, you know?
Without a doubt. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think he's like really good at seeing past like exterior things and like just valuing people for what's in their heart and mind. And
well, and you
I don't
do
know.
the same too.
I strive to, yeah, for sure.
I mean,
Yeah.
I feel like just from what I see of you, you're really good at that.
Yeah. So, and I think, you know, my mom growing up, like, she puts way more value in her relationships than the way she looks, or, you know, her wardrobe, or, you know. And so I think just like having that sort of influence of like what is to be valued, I think like those are lessons that yeah, right, those lessons that come at such a young age.
Yeah, that's a big thing, and that's something that I'm trying to heal from, you know, personally. And it's not my mom's fault, but my mom growing up was, and still is, just a beautiful woman. And so I always felt like I wanted to measure up. You know what I mean? And it wasn't ever my mom making me feel bad, ever. It was just like her being her. But, you know, that feeling of like, oof, I need to be on, I need to be prepped, I need to show up and look nice. And, you know, a lot of stuff that just doesn't matter. Doesn't matter at all. And the older I get, the more I go, I just want to be with people who see my heart. You know, because it's conversations like we're having right now that make me excited about life.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like the essence of who we are and figuring out who we are, even if we don't quite know it yet. Okay, so a couple last things. Any books that you just feel like were life-changing for you, that you feel like the people listening to us would benefit from?
Oh, man.
Because as I listen to podcasts, I'm always like, what was that person reading? Like, what is it that influenced them? And books are just such an easy thing to get a hold of.
Yeah. I actually think that a lot of podcasts have influenced me in the last few years. Like, do you know On Being with Krista Tippett?
No.
Oh, amazing. Yeah. Spiritual food for sure. Like, one of the most, try to find the one with, the lead singer of Cloud Cult. I think it's a gorgeous interview.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So after we get off this, and it doesn't even have to be today, but will you send me a link to those podcasts?
Sure.
I'll link them in the show notes.
Yeah, for sure. So I think like, I don't know. Funny enough, like the only book that's coming to mind right now is a book about writing. It's called Writing Down the Bones. No, okay. I'm lying. There's a couple other books. So that one is really amazing. Writing Down the Bones. I read it probably when I was like in 10th grade or something. And it was just so freeing. Because I think for the first time I saw that it wasn't about like I think I had mild dyslexia, and my writing was like, my spelling was horrible, and like I just didn't really enjoy writing. And it's so ironic. And now looking back, that like, you know, I love writing. Like I love being able to have the tool to express myself and like, you know, craft this sort of like vision for other people to read. And like, you know, it's such an amazing tool. And
I agree.
So anyway, Writing Down the Bones. I can't remember the author's name. And then Dear Sugar.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. So beautiful. I love that one. And Elizabeth Gilbert has been really inspiring too. Like I just heard another podcast with her the other day, and like,
have you read
Big
Magic?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's one of my favorite books. I've read it twice.
Yeah. She's so great.
I mean, as a creative person, she touches on like all of the hangups of being a creative person.
Yeah. Yeah. Another one I just finished is Comedy Sex God by Pete Holmes. Have you heard of Pete Holmes before? I think you might like him.
Oh, I'm sure really cool. I would.
He's a comedian, actually. But I think what's different about him is that he is like so on fire about God that it doesn't matter who he's talking to, he'll talk about God because it's his favorite subject in the world.
That's so cool. And what's
his book is called Comedy Sex God. And it's like funny and like pretty light reading, but he talks about like meditation and like sort of it's his journey from being raised very conservative Christian, which you'd probably jive with, and then like his wife leaving him and like his world sort of like falling apart, and then finding God again and like just really like having the spiritual awakening. And like, so he's super cool.
I'll definitely be buying that one.
yeah, it's great. Yeah, so I just feel like I would love to like be able to have a conversation like this with him. Like there's a few people who I feel that way with, and so I don't know if it will ever happen, but yeah, I mean, it's really cool just to get to chat with you today. So.
Oh, it's amazing. This has been an honor. And I have one last question for you.
All right.
And it was the last one on the list that I sent you. What do you want people to know beyond a shadow of a doubt?
Something that's been on my heart recently is, two quotes, I guess. All shall be well, and all shall be well, and all manner of all things shall be well. And that's a Julian of Norwich quote. And I think the other day I keep coming back to that one, and it's actually on my office wall right now. And the other day I was thinking of it as like, maybe it's not like a reassurance to people, but maybe it's like a mantra that she had for herself of like, it's gonna be okay, darn it, like I am visualizing my future and like it's gonna be good, and I think like we don't know what that's going to look like, but somebody like me, I can endure so much trauma. Like I lost a leg, I lost, a lot of stuff, and it's still like magically wonderful and maybe even better than I was expecting my life to ever be. And it's just like so crazy. Like if you allow yourself to be open to the unexpected answers,
I just want to bask in that right now. For those of you that are listening and not watching the video, I just have my hand on my heart because I resonate with that so deeply.
And another one that came recently was this is the world. Beautiful and terrible and beautiful things will happen. Don't be afraid. And that's
I love that one.
Yeah.
I love that one.
And I might be slightly misquoting it.
No, who said it? Because I've heard it before.
It's like philosopher writer Frederick Buechner, I think is his name. And I really I came to me again this morning because I read another quote from him and I was like, oh my gosh, I need to get a hold of some of his books because like I don't know.
Should we do a book club?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
The Jacqueline Steele Book Club.
No, it could be our like just me and you and Grace.
No, I really like want to start reading a bunch of new books, and maybe this is the time to do it, you know?
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, like maybe, I don't know. I'm kind of inspired to start like a book club where it's almost like a dirty Santa thing where you come with a book that you've read and you like do sort of an advertisement promo for it, and then you just like kind of randomly get each other's books, and then
that's a great idea. I love that. You should definitely do that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Once all of this stupid Corona stuff is over, I'm so excited to have people in my house. But
same here, just dinner parties. That's like my favorite way to socialize, is have people over and cook dinner.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I love cooking for people.
I'm looking so forward to that too. Okay, can you tell everybody where they can find you online?
You can find me on Instagram at tidyhome_maker or at tidy_and_snail. That's my stationery company.
And I'll link everything too, so you guys can just click and follow. And
yeah, I'm pretty like open, and I love engaging with people. So yeah, I'm kind of an open book, I guess. And
you really are. And your Instagram stories are so honest and incredible too, which I feel like we could do a whole podcast episode just on you speaking directly into the camera on your Instagram stories.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like people just really resonate whenever you're really like open about the hard stuff, you know? Like, I feel like that's when I resonate the most with people. And so like, if I can act the way that I want other people to act, then, you know, it gives permission for people.
I was just going to say, it's permission.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think there's something beautiful. I think people see each other's hearts, whether we realize it or not. Like, when you show me your heart, it makes me go, that's a safe person to share the real me.
Yeah. And I don't know when I learned this, but like, oh gosh, somebody wise, I can't remember who, but they were like, oh no, okay, Alain de Botton is another person who's recently been like reintroduced to me. He's a philosopher, and he started like basically a church for atheists. Super cool guy though. And I think he was the one to say like, when you go on a date with somebody, the first thing you should do is like, this is how I'm weird. How are you weird? Like, he's like, and I think that like makes so much sense. Like
that,
yeah.
It's so disarming.
I'm crazy, you know?
It's so disarming. My favorite people, and the people I'm most drawn to in life, are always people who are like that.
Yeah.
You know?
And I like Kelsey, one of our, like maybe a month into our relationship, he told me like he's had kind of a rough past. And I was just like, that is so honest. And like, like that honesty means way more to me than if you had like been to seminary, you know, or like, you know, you don't need to have a perfect track record. Like, what I crave is like honesty, because I know that I can trust you as a person, even if like you've done some crazy stuff in the past, you know? Anyway, so yeah.
Thank you so much for taking the time to do this.
Oh, this is so much fun.
I'm so glad that you had fun. I mean, I just feel like there are a lot of golden nuggets in here.
Good.